Welcome, traveler. Please have a seat. When a fantasy book series comes out, the first book has to introduce the setting, has to introduce the characters, the magic system, and so on. But the second book, if you really want the series to be successful, has to successfully expand on everything while introducing us to more. Unbound does that very well. Where Ascendant had a slow beginning and kind of felt a little strange because it started out wanting to be YA and eventually it moved to not being YA, so it's kind of a strange start that some people might struggle with a little bit. Unbound doesn't have that problem. Unbound knows what it is from page 1 to the end, and it's something that really strengthens the book over Ascendant. Ascendant is very good, but it really strengthens the book over Ascendant because it doesn't have to deal with that tonal shift. Unbound also doesn't have to spend nearly as much time establishing its premise. Instead, it gets to expand on the things that make the first book really work. Holt and Ash, they're the dragon bond, the magic system, and the world at large. Because not only do we see the existence of dragon bonds, but Unbound is really begins to explore what that bond means, how the bond works, and how it develops the characters around it. Because the bond is not something that grows in power just because. It has fundamental factors involving character development, not unlike what Brandon Sanderson does in the Stormlight Archive, where the characters have to develop as people together to increase their bond. It's not just something that you exercise enough and you get stronger. Unbound feels like the book where Songs of Chaos begins showing what kind of series it actually wants to be and what kind of series it can be. Holt is considerably more capable in Unbound. In Ascendant, he goes from being fairly weak to, an average kitchen boy, then he gets the dragon egg, then he establishes dragon bond, and at the end of the book, he becomes an Ascendant. Unbound explores this new power and explores his developing power as it grows more than the Ascendant level. Just as a reminder, in the Songs of Chaos, there are different levels of Dragon Bond. There is Ascendant, there is Champion, there is High Champion, there is Lord, and then there is Paragon. And then as you get farther into the series, there's also the potential for another step beyond Paragon. But for Unbound, that doesn't matter. So while Holt is more capable, Ash is also growing alongside of him, and both of them are becoming stronger and more confident in who they are as the book goes on, where they were kind of confused and a little idealistic in the first book. They start to see things for what they were and what they are, and understand that being a dragon rider and being a dragon even are not the super easy, wonderful life that they had imagined. And they face the very real fact that they don't fit in anywhere. In this society that is built on extreme rules of everybody knowing their place, they don't have a place. And that makes people around them react oftentimes to them in a negative light because they're seen as chaos bringers. You violate the world order, so therefore there's something wrong with you and you have to be dealt with, or you have to be pushed into a spot. And in Ascendant, at the end of Ascendant, they refuse to join the Order of Dragon Riders, so they're not part of the Dragon Riders. They're not part of standard society, and they get kicked out of the kingdom that they help save, and they're also chased by Dragon Riders because they're not in the Order. In Unbound, all of this develops more, and in Unbound, they are desperate to become stronger because they have discovered that their magic helps heal people of the Blight, which is this sickness that sort of makes the undead and comes with the Scourge. And they want to heal everybody of it, and to do this, they have to become more powerful, so it becomes their intense focus. One thing Ascendant and Unbound does well is it handles their development in power by forcing them to develop as characters, so it feels earned. It's not something where they just go out and do 350 jumping jacks or whatever and become stronger, they have to go through a considerable ordeal at the hands, or instigated rather, by Rake, who is a new character who comes out. He's Songs of Chaos' take on a half dragon. When he comes along, he's able to teach them things and push them to develop more because he sees their potential, where and he really becomes their second mentor figure. But Unbound isn't simply seeing Holt and Ash become stronger, it's learning more about what being bonded to a dragon actually means. And it handles this so well. It would be very easy for a book to just be like, yeah, and then they get stronger. But because their development is tied to their relationship and how they interact with one another and how they feel as people, that bond is really intense, and it really changes and develops with the characters. This is not a quick escalation, even though for Dragon Riders it supposedly usually takes a long time, and for them it doesn't. It's something that is earned. It's something that feels like it has weight and like it matters, because by the time they come out of their ordeal to become the next level, they're much stronger as characters and as a pair. In Ascendant, Holt and Ash establish our understanding of the bond. Unbound starts to show us their experience isn't the only version. You get a glimpse of Osric, Agravain, and Sovereign, or also known as Thrall, the two villains of Ascendant. You get a glimpse of them in Ascendant. In Unbound, you start to get point of view chapters from Osric's point of view, and discover that where Holt and Ash's bond is all about trust and love for one another and absolute understanding of one another, and it's about hope and belief in people and each other, Osric and Thrall is slavery. Osric's bond is painful. It hurts him physically, it hurts him at the level of the soul. Thrall is a dominating character who forces him to do things, who pushes the negative parts of him to make decisions over the other parts of him, and makes Osric a much worse person, but also tortures Osric in a lot of ways. And there's zero trust between the two of them. It's literally the polar opposite of the relationship between Ash and Holt, and it is fascinating to watch in Unbound. But you also begin to realize the Dragon Bond really depends on the people involved. It's not the same for everybody. Some people have very negative experience that the Dragon Riders either aren't aware of being a thing or simply don't talk about because they have a lot of secrets and they don't bring them up. So we go from this is how the bond works to this is how Holt and Ash's bond works, and understanding it can be completely different, and it just really depends on who those two people are, the dragon and the rider. And those bonds change over time. They strengthen, but they strengthen what they were. So Holt and Ash is based on love and hope. As their bond strengthens, so does that love and hope. As Osric and Thrall's bond strengthens, so does the pain and torture. And their identities can become deeply intertwined, where these two characters, the dragon and the rider, can feel each other's desires, they can feel each other's thoughts sometimes, and that becomes more true as they develop over time. And you also learn that the bond can be closed, where Thrall very frequently will temporarily cut off his bond to Osric because he doesn't want Osric to know what he's thinking. With Holt and Ash, this is a painful process that they have to do on purpose and with significant effort. With Osric and Thrall, Thrall is the one who always does it, and for Thrall, you can't really tell what it means. For Osric, it's a relief from the pain. And we also learn a lot more about bonds in terms of how the dragon's core looks is really impacted by the personality of the dragon. For Ash, it's a moonscape and a nightscape. For Thrall, it's a hall full of chains. The other thing Unbound does really well is the world gets bigger. We move away from just dragon bonds to learning about the world and how it functions, threats and conflicts that already exist between kingdoms, and more information about the Scourge. We learn a lot more about Thrall. We're introduced to new, wonderful characters who really are a significant addition to the story, and a significant addition as side characters. The way Aberranth alone is handled is amazing and really well written. He's a great character. As the story goes on, the threats and conflicts feel larger. The history surrounding dragons and riders becomes more important. And Holt has moved well beyond being a kitchen boy who stumbled into something extraordinary. He's becoming part of something older than himself, but he's also becoming more important to the world around him. But one thing that he does very well is Holt never truly stops being Holt. Whenever he interacts with other writers that are more powerful than him, a lot of times he comes across at least as submissive. And then when he deals with servants and people lower than him, he comes across more on their level because he doesn't forget who he is. Unbound does a good job of showing us that there's much more beyond what we've seen of this world already, and starts to expand on that significantly. Now, one thing Unbound does that it struggles with is begins showing us these other points of view. And it does a good job with Osric and Thrall for the most part, but we start dealing with a lot more characters than we dealt with in book one. And most of those characters are dealt with very well. Rake is very interesting. Aberranth is very interesting. Aberranth is hilarious, quite honestly. But it begins to shift from being about Holt and Ash. It doesn't completely do it, but this is something that carries over into book 3. And in book 3, you get a lot more of this alternating point of view. It's traditional for epic fantasy. And it can leave you wanting a little more of that intimacy with Holt and Ash than you got before. And Unbound begins this process, and there's times when you're like, okay, I really like the relationship with Osric and Thrall, but maybe I don't need to see everything yet. Or maybe, no, what it really needs is you need more chapters with Holt and Ash, I think. There's a lot of them, and it really focuses on them, but it's the beginning of a drift that is more a weakness in book 3, but is introduced in book 2. Other than that, Unbound really does not have a lot of weaknesses. It's a much stronger book than Ascendant, and I liked Ascendant a great deal, but Unbound is able to breathe. It's able to shrug off the tonal shift that weighed Ascendant down. And Unbound does take its time. And I think that's one of the strengths of all of the books so far in this series, and I've read up to 4. They take their time when it feels like they could go faster. Not in a negative way, but like it feels like a lot of books might go faster with the type of story it is, but it really takes time. Unbound takes time to really dive into these character emotions and bonds and development, and not just bonds in the sense of Dragon Bond, but like just bonds. And you really get a sense for who these characters are in a way that not every book, and especially in fantasy with a lot of point of views, pulls off. Unbound does a very good job of that. And I can't talk about the ending. It's a very important ending, and it's very, very interesting ending. And it's not what I expected to happen, and in a good way. This book is definitely one that goes on the shelf. If you like if you like Dragon Rider fantasies, if you like slow developing characters, if you like progression fantasy, I really recommend giving both Ascendant and Unbound a shot. Michael R. Miller does an increasingly good job from book to book. That's all for today, and I will see you next time you come around.